is the president. And you go, yeah? Where was that on January 6th? I get the whole begging, pleading. I get that while you're standing before the person in the robe with the gavel. But this is the first one. Felony count, going to get some jail. It was pointed out today by a friend in Florida. Going to lose his right to vote, which is kind of interesting. And I guess for a while, also no gun. No gun either. Convicted felon, no gun. Now there are still, I guess, another 535 people who have been arrested for criminal activity on the siege day, on the insurrection day, on the criminal day. This, they're saying, could set that tone. Again, prosecutors want 18 months. They got 8. It means he's going to do some jail time. We'll see. We'll see what this means. I got to know. I wonder if they got anything out of him. What the deal was. But good luck. Good luck in prison. And I'm hoping a bunch of them will get some time. This is crazy. It just is what it was. Over the weekend, we launched a new radio program in the heart of New York City on radio station WBAI, and during the program, we got a call from a guy named Peter that stuck with me, and I've been thinking about it for the last day or so. He talked about how, thanks to his father's union, his father passed a couple of years back, but the father and mother lived on his pension while they were alive, while he was alive, and then when he passed, the pension went to his mother, and his mother was able to live several good years and get through some very hairy times because of the father's union pension. And it got me thinking, and one of the things I talked about was the concept of the three-legged stool that my grandparents' generation constructed. This idea that you have a defined benefit pension plan, you spend time at work, you get a defined benefit pension plan, you save some money, because throughout your work years, you squirrel a little bit away, good thing. And the other leg was the Social Security. So you put a little bit of money in a coffee can, put it aside. You got the work that you had done for the mass of your life, funding a little bit of your golden years, and of course, Social Security. And I said, over the weekend that sadly, during my lifetime, that three-legged stool has been whittled down to a stick that we're really just getting beaten with. It's not even like there's retirement security going to be possible for the mass of people coming, in the next 30, 40 years. This idea that you're going to be able to retire and not have to work and live with some measure of dignity and respect for the mass of the working class is going to be non-existent, because the reality is that defined benefit pension, that defined pension fund that was so common during my grandparents' era, is virtually non-existent. There are a handful of places where it's still there, mostly union funds, mostly building trades funds. There's still that defined benefit that when you retire, you're going to get X amount of dollars per month until you die. And you add that with your Social Security and your savings, and you're going to do okay. But for the mass of people, they've been saddled with these crummy 401ks. And it got me thinking about, that three-legged stool. Because, there's no more defined benefit pension. Everyone's got a 401k. And if you look at some of the numbers that are out there, the average 401k in the country is like 18 grand. Some really ridiculous number like that, which means there are a handful of people who have enormous sums in their 401ks, and then the mass of people who have nothing. Because wages haven't kept up with inflation. People are struggling to make ends meet, so there's no savings happening. We're going to put money into a 401k, and then we're going to save in the tin can. That isn't happening. And what the weird thing is, and I had this conversation today because I was explaining what a defined benefit pension fund was to somebody, because most people don't get it. the defined benefit pension was something that was funded by the employer. It was part of your compensation. So when you made your 10, 15, 20 bucks an hour, they put extra money into a pension fund that was specifically for you. And every year of service that you worked for that company, you got a little bit more. And as I was explaining to this person, the pension fund that they were getting into, if they worked 10 years, they would get $145 a year for those 10 years. It'd be $1,450 in retirement. You work 30 years, it's 3 times that. It's $145 per year of service when you get to a certain age. You combine that with your Social Security, you combine that with your savings. You're going to do really well. Sad reality, as I said, people with the 401ks, nothing there. Because most of the time, employers will only match when you put money in. And if you can't afford to put it in, they get off scot-free. And then, when did you put money aside? So we're heading into a time where Social Security is the main bit of retirement. And understand, Social Security was never meant to be a retirement program. It was an anti-poverty program. It said, this is the line. We're going to make sure that Granny doesn't have to eat cat food and live on the street in a cardboard box. We're going to set the line here so you can have a bare minimum standard of living. The other things, the savings and the defined benefit pension, that was to give you a livelihood, to give you a life. And those have been eviscerated. And now that one last stick, Social Security, there are those who just want to bludgeon us with that. And there are people who believe that it's not going to be around. Because we haven't done anything to shore it up yet. We haven't done the things that needed to be done, like scrapping the cap. We haven't done any of those things yet. So in, not the too distant future, they're saying potentially it could pay, 3/4 of what it's supposed to pay, which means, again, that defined benefit pension's gone for most people. The savings didn't happen. And now that anti-poverty program that was supposed to keep you right at that line is going to get whacked. All because the wealthy in this country have said, no, we want more. We want more. There was an interesting op-ed I think it was in the New York Times this weekend, that pointed out that the richest 10% of households in this country own 80% of all the wealth. That means if you have 10 people in a room, one guy owns 80% of all the wealth. Everybody else is fighting over the other 20%. In fact, the top 1% of households in this country own 16 times that of the bottom half, the entire half of the country. Just that top 1%. They pointed out that in this country, there's a combined wealth of all the households in the country, combined wealth of what this nation is worth of almost $130 trillion in the first quarter of this year. And they point out that the wealthiest 1%, they own over 32% of it. That is up from 23.4% back in 1989. And again, you can look at 1989 as that moment where Reaganomics really took hold, the massive tax breaks that we handed out to the wealthy, where we dropped the top marginal tax rate from 70% down to 28%. This is how the wealthy have created just in unimaginable amounts of wealth, and how they've pocketed for themselves. And yet we can't seem to get on the same page of going, we do need to tax the rich. In fact, there was a study done back in 2018. The Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development Group, the OECD group, they found that 28 countries in that group, 10% of the households owned 52% of the wealth. The bottom 60% owned 12% of the wealth in those 28 countries. In the U.S., and we're the outlier here, in the U.S., the top 10% held 79.5%, almost 80% of all the wealth. The bottom 60% owned 2.4%. So you go, Our wealthy doing much better than the other advanced countries by a lot, and our poor doing much worse. Our working poor. And why is that? I go back to the fact that we've allowed unions to get broken up. We've allowed ourselves to be pitted against each other. And we've allowed the very wealthy to pull the strings of our politics to ensure that more for them and the hell with the rest of us. And this is not new. There's no surprise here. The thing that I think is positive that's happening is people are waking up to this. Peter calling and saying, look, I now get it. I now recognize why my father went to all of these workplaces and saying, hey, you got a union card? I now get why he was so adamant in saying, no, you have to get a union job. He was clear. He's going, I finally figured it out. I wondered why all these years, why that was so important. Now I know. And what I'm hoping is that there'll be this epiphany of working people going, now I get it. Now I get why the employer is so anti-union. Now I get why Amazon spent $200 million to fight back one little campaign in Bessemer, Alabama, a right-to-work state that they could have easily allowed in and divided and ended up decertifying in a year anyway. But it's all about the power and control, which is why I'm thrilled to see in this moment we're seeing a lot of work actions, a lot of strikes going on. People are finally saying enough is enough. And it's coming down to the fact that the pandemic has highlighted the fact that pays low and working conditions are horrible. Over the weekend, I talked about the Frito-Lay strike in Topeka, Kansas. You got 600 workers on strike. They've been on strike for, I guess, a couple weeks now, a week and a half. Why'd they go on strike? They were working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, every day. Some of the people not having days off for months. And not having a choice. Being forced to work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then having to get back up and get back to work at 3 a.m. then the next day. It's crazy. And they're finally saying, had enough. And I'm hoping that we as voters stop with the political divide. Stop with the here's some red meat, fight over this. Here's one cookie for you. I'm going to take the bag. You can fight over this one. And I look at the story over the weekend. This company, Huffcore, they're the people who make those. Have you ever been to like a hotel ballroom and those partitions that go between the big room? So they take the gigantic room and they break it down into small little rooms with these accordion-like partitions that they can move along tracks. Well, they make that stuff. This company has been in business 120 years. A family-owned business in Janesville, Wisconsin. 120 years. They get bought up not too long ago by this Open Gate Capital, one of these hedge funds. And thank goodness for the pandemic. But Huffco is now Huffcore is now announced it's coming. They're moving to Mexico. So they don't have to pay the $20.90 an hour that they're paying their workforce and providing the health care that they're providing for their workforce. No, now they can pay a fifth of that to the workers in Monterrey, Mexico. And the union leadership said, it's not really surprising. You knew this is their MO. This is what they do. This is who they are. And you go back, throughout the years, they've done this. In 2013, they closed down the Golden Guernsey Dairy there in Waukesha, Wisconsin. No notice, 100 people out in the street. 2014, Fusion Paper in Connecticut. They shut them down after getting a 10-year loan from the state and signing a 6-year union contract. They just up and shut down. Also in 2015, they, without any notice whatsoever, they shut down the Penny Saver paper in California, 678 people to the curb because, hey, it's good for business. It's how we're saving the company. And in fact, that's basically what they said in their statement. Their statement was, their defense was, well, they blamed the pandemic for one. But in their statement, they said, well, they made a difficult decision. It wasn't a difficult decision. They knew exactly what they were doing when they bought that company. But they went on to say that Huffcore is suffering significant negative economic effects related to COVID-19 pandemic. I want to know if they took PPP money. They said when considering these impacts and Huffcore's aging manufacturing facility in Janesville, the future of the entire business is in jeopardy. Therefore, to ensure HUFCO's survival and long-term viability, the difficult decision was made to relocate to an alternative facility. Yeah, they're moving to Mexico to run away from paying people decent wages. They're running away to be able to exploit labor, to exploit the environment, and take advantage of all of the money they can probably get there. And screw their workers. And I go back to, is this what we want from companies? This was for 120 years, a good family-run business that provided good jobs to families, a good, solid, sustaining wage with health care and retirement security. And now, just like that, they're going to rip it out from under these people and take it somewhere else. Why? So the wealthy can put more money in their pockets, so they can have more in their hedge fund. And that 1%, maybe they get to 81%. Maybe they get to 82%. It's criminal, I tell you, which is why we need to have some serious tax changes in this country. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day San Francisco's Central Labor Council voted narrowly to end the general strike, then in its fourth day. It had been one of 3 historic strikes that turned the tide towards industrial organizing in the 1930s. It emerged as part of the ongoing longshoremen strike, which started in May. The decision was controversial. Longshoremen and seamen raged that leadership of the strike had been torn from them by more conservative elements. As author of Workers on the Waterfront, Bruce Nelson puts it, after 2.5 months on strike, literally thousands of arrests, at least 6 deaths, and hundreds of serious injuries, the men and their families were holding the line. But their allies were gradually cutting the ties of solidarity that had been the strike's lifeblood. The shipping bosses forced a vote for arbitration from the longshoremen and without the seamen. As Nelson notes, this served to drive a wedge between the two unions, creating a rift that would only deepen. The two would continue to strike until the end of July, but the strike left the longshoremen emboldened. They pushed back on the job, driving off scabs and establishing work rules and conditions ahead of the arbitrator's ruling, which came in October. The hiring hall was finally established. While it was decided that the union and the shipping bosses would rule the hall jointly, the union controlled the position of dispatcher. This meant that the union determined hiring, which put an end to the despised shape-up. The award also mandated wage raises and a coast-wide contract. It would serve as a catalyst for the founding of the ILWU 3 years later. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So last week, not surprisingly, the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education voted to on their grand consolidation plan. As you know, the Commonwealth owns 14 state-owned universities and colleges across the Commonwealth. They want to take 6 of them and then consolidate them down to 2. So they're going to take 3 up in the north. They're going to consolidate them down to 1, and then 3, I guess, out west. They're going to make 1. I don't know what the names are. I don't know what any of the details are, and I don't think anybody else does either. But we're going to do it, which is just insane to me. But again, like I said, not a real surprise here. What was the surprise is that there's like a lot of money being thrown at this. And my question, and I'm going to ask Jamie Martin here this in a second, my question is, if we had money to throw at this to tear it apart, why don't we have money to save it? It just seems wrong to me. And here to share some thoughts on that, I've asked Jamie Martin to come talk with us. Jamie is the president of APSCUF, the union that represents the faculty and the coaches and all of the great folks who make our state-owned universities what they are. Jamie, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much, Rick. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
So let's start with that point. There's, as I understand, $50 million from the rescue plan that's going to go into to education. I understand there's another potentially $200 million coming down the road. Republicans have loosened the purse strings there. If that money's there to rip this system apart, why isn't the money there to save it?
And great questions. The money that we have coming in this year is $50 million with the guarantee, or I guess the hope of $100 million next year and maybe 50 the following, for a total of $200 million. What we'll hear is that that's one-time funding. So that they're using that, as an opportunity to say this isn't going to be long-term, so therefore we can't use it long-term. We have to use it for various things in the short term because it's one-time funding.
So we're going to use it for this one-time funding to spend a whole lot of money buying all new signs and letterhead and all kinds of things to create new universities out of whole cloth. That seems like an enormous waste to me.
Some of the money will probably be used in the consolidation, but there are other elements or other opportunities for marketing and recruitment to try to increase enrollments, for DEI initiatives, for some technology. But you're right. I don't know how much of this will be spent just on those kinds of things. We are supposed to be spending some of it on other pieces that should help grow enrollments as opposed to just the consolidation.
Now, so as I understand it, and help me walk through some of this, I know up in the north, they're going to take Bloomsburg, Lock Haven, and Mansfield and do something with those three, combine them in somehow and create something new. But I guess the argument was they're going to keep the campuses. Walk me through how that works. They plan this to work, or don't they even know?
Rick, I don't know. There's so many details that we don't yet know. There are so many big questions that have not yet been answered. So it was a bit disappointing that the Board of Governors voted to move this forward without some of those details and answers. So, for example, we have questions remaining about the NCAA and how they're going to rule about allowing athletic teams on all six. You're talking about what's this going to look like. We're not sure. We don't know how many online courses students would have to take to complete their degrees. We're still not sure what the organizational structure will look like. So we don't know what departments or what disciplines will exist on which campuses. We always say the devil's in the details, but that surely is going to be the case in these two consolidations.
Now, as I understand, and this is the part that's a little concerning to me, there was talk that I guess the claim that I saw was that no students wouldn't take any more than 25% of their classes online. Is that right?
We don't know.
Oh, we don't even know that. So no. We could be potentially just turning this whole thing over to an online kind of thing.
Well, there have been some guarantees that won't be the case, but my concerns are until we see what these plans look like, we won't know. So my big concern is that students would have to take upper division courses through some type of hybrid model, as opposed to even the lower division courses, which may be available on each individual campus. But as I said, there are so many unanswered questions. And what we did here at the Board of Governors is this is supposed to be an iterative process. That wasn't supposed to be the last step. I see it as just one step on a long road ahead, and there are still ways to correct course. And maybe see that once you get into this may not be the best option for those 6 universities.
No, it sounds horrible to me. I mean, if we wanted, look, I think they're the jewel of an education system. I think Pennsylvania is situated to be able to educate kids and keep them here if we could make tuition more affordable. And for me, that comes back to the state actually coming back and picking up the tuition like they used to in the past to make those universities more affordable for kids to be able to go to. Look, if you can't afford to go, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do, how you move the pieces around on the board. Nobody's going to be able to afford to come.
Exactly. And that really is the fundamental problem. So we're talking about, we spent a lot of time over this past year talking about consolidation when what we should have been doing is advocating for appropriate funding for our universities. To be somewhere in the 47th, 48th rank in funding for public higher ed, that's the problem. I mean, that's the key issue. And instead of trying to, I don't know, find a Band-Aid to try to fix what looks like it's ailing us, we should all be at the legislative, in front of the legislative body asking for more money.
Yeah. Now, again, when you think of the state-owned universities, their mission really was, I would argue it probably isn't anymore, based on what I'm seeing, is to be in these local communities so you can make tuition more affordable. Working class kids, first time college students can have access to these universities and still be somewhere near their homes. Now we're changing all of that game. It seems like the mission is no longer at the front of someone's mind.
Right. I mean, and you're right. We were supposed to be the high quality, affordable option for Pennsylvania's working class families, middle class families, and we've lost that edge. And I think, the thing that's most concerning for me, Rick, is that we haven't heard from the students. We don't know what they think about this. We haven't, we had a pandemic. It was hard to get them engaged. And I think we still need to do that whenever the semester begins, to get to those campuses and hear from those students, because they're the ones that this system's in place to serve. And we need to know what they think about the notion of having to take courses online, because they've told us that they don't like it after they've experienced it through the pandemic.
Yeah, most people I've talked to not thrilled at all with the, because there was a point where I was concerned that cyber charters would make a huge impact and really start to harm our brick and mortar schools. After the pandemic and talking with parents, I'm no longer concerned about that, because I think everyone agrees. I do not believe you get the same kind of education looking at a computer screen that you get sitting in a classroom with a well-qualified teacher at the front of the classroom.
No, it's just, it's radically different. It's a different experience for the students and the faculty. The other concern I have for the students that will be at these consolidated universities would be, I would be in a classroom in Bloomsburg with my students in a face-to-face setting, and now students at Mansfield and Lock Haven will be seeing me the way you're seeing me right now. So it's going to be a radically different experience even for those students. So a lot of unanswered questions, and I think the people we need to hear from are our students.
No, absolutely, because you got to go now. If I'm a senior coming out of high school this next year, am I going to be looking at one of these universities and one of these colleges, knowing that there's all of this chaos going on? This is a bad decision. This is a bad plan. Or it's not even a plan. This is just bad all the way around.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, we have concerns about students that are going to these campuses and asking faculty, will I be able to finish my degree at Mansfield? And they're having to say, I don't know, because we haven't even seen, what the organizational chart will look like in terms of where students can complete degrees on which campuses. So yeah, I'm certainly worried about that.
So let me ask you this, because let's say you went to Mansfield, you got 3 years in, you got one more to go, you get a degree from where? This new entity that they're creating, or do you get it from Mansfield, and then 5 years down the road there's no more Mansfield, and they go, oh well, it seems not great.
Yeah, I mean, alumni were speaking out about that, and it's not clear what these universities will be called. And so they're going to have a new name, because the plan is it'll be one accredited university. So I don't know if the diploma will say Northeastern University at Mansfield, Northeastern University at Bloomsburg. So it's, those are legitimate concerns that students will have and that alumni will have.
Yeah, and you got to wonder how much you're going to lose from all of those. And now you talked about accreditation. Are you certain you're going to get accreditation?
That'll be up to middle states. I know that they're going through that process right now. I have the same kinds of concerns for accredited programs at each of the universities, and whether they may have to go through a reaccreditation process because they're going to be a new university with a different accreditation than they have right now. So I think it's going to be messy, would be maybe a kind way of thinking about that.
Now, as I was reading some of the commentary from folks, there was also some discussion about the number of degrees that would be, the number of majors that would be available. And in one place, I saw, someone said that they're looking at 8 to 10 being the core number of majors. Does that mean they're going to be slashing a bunch of majors at these different universities?
We don't know.
Again, we're going into major change. You're going to completely uproot the lives of students, of faculty, of communities, and we don't know. That's the best answer. And sadly, I mean, I get that that's all you got, because that's all there is.
Right. I always, I've said to students as a faculty member, I hate saying I don't know. I say it when I don't know. But there are so many details that have not yet been filled in. So we have this skeleton framework, and all of the important issues and all of the important pieces are still missing.
So ultimately, because when I look at this from a worker perspective. I look at this as the folks on this PASHE board going, how do we slash costs? How do we get rid of people? How do we get rid of the maintenance crew? How do we get rid of the faculty? How do we get rid of the people who do recruiting? How do we get rid of people? This seems to me to be a massive layoff scheme. And then I sadly foresee more adjuncts, more things that are going to be, well, again, not great for students and not a great draw, which is then, in my view, really a concern where people aren't going to come, and then you're going to have magnified any problem you ever had.
Right. Now, we're hoping that some of the money that the governor has helped, along with the General Assembly, this one-time funding of $200 million, part of it will be used to help preserve jobs. So that was an important piece for us, for our sister union of AFSCME and the workers there. But certainly when you start to cut the faculty lines, you cut staff, it has a major impact on the quality that the quality of education and their experience that they'll have at that university. So it doesn't make sense to me that you'd be consolidating at the same time you're thinking about cutting, if what you're trying to do is expand opportunities for students.
Yeah. How much, what's the number that the PASHE folks are saying that they're struggling with? What's the lost number that they're throwing out?
I don't know what the last. It seems like it's a moving target at times, Rick. So you'll hear about the consolidation is supposed to lead to student opportunities, but it's going to cost more over 5 years than it will save. They're talking about trying to get rid of cross subsidization, but if you look at the plan, that's still going to occur. So you can't find out what the actual number is that they're trying to, what is the hole they're trying to fill. But I don't think it's going to happen in the first 5 years that they're going to see any kind of good return on investment.
Yeah. So how much of this is just pure ideology? We need to tear down the system. We need to consolidate to push towards privatization.
I think that's been something we've heard for a number of years, sometimes at the Appropriations Committee hearing, that there are too many universities. We've heard, failing universities, which is just not the case. But I think that this has been something some individuals would like to have wanted to see for some time, and some would rather go further and actually close some of these campuses. So we were happy to see in this plan that there was a guarantee that that would not occur.
So last line of questioning I've got for you, because, I'm always a believer of activism, of, getting, calling your representatives, doing something. We can right wrongs. We can fix things. We can move in the right direction. Any chance of this going back to some bit of sanity, or is this ship sailed?
I really am hopeful that during the discussion of the Board of Governors, they talked about this being an iterative process, that we will, have benchmarks we have to hit, metrics we'll have to look at, we'll have to see how things are going, we'll get answers to questions. And so that's why I'm not seeing this as the end of the road. Just this was one step, and I think there's still opportunities in the future to make a different decision. If the board actually would, get information that says they need to correct course, that they will do that.
Yeah, because everything that I've read on this, and I've tried to keep up with everything that's been put out. This seems like a rush job. This should not have been voted on. This should have been pushed off for another year to let us get out of the pandemic, to let us get back to some bit of normalcy, get people back on campus, and go that route. This just seems to be a rush job, and an ideological rush job at that.
I think that you're probably right. And the folks that spoke out, and there were a lot of faculty, staff, community members, some students were saying the same thing, like, why are we rushing through this in a 9-month period of time in the middle of a global pandemic, and when we don't have answers to really important questions. So I don't have the answer to that. I think it could have been ideological at some level, but again, I'm not saying that this is the end of the road.
Right.
Just one more step, and we can certainly have some off ramps, I think, depending on answers that we get.
Who are the targets that we're going after to convince that, I know, I think I read Judy Schwank actually voted for this, which kind of surprised me. Is she someone to reach out to? Who are we targeting?
Well, I think, all the individuals on the board, they won't be meeting now again until fall, but certainly I'd like to see what are the benchmarks going to be. We haven't even seen those yet, Rick, to know what are going to be the things that we're measuring, what's the measuring stick we're using to figure out if this is working.
Right.
There's a lot of work that has to be done. And I know the board said that, they talked about, we don't have to think about the how of this. I don't know who is going to do the how.
Jeez, that's just crazy. But when this continues, I hope you'll come back and keep us up to date on how bad this is going to be and what we can do to help. But Jamie, I appreciate your time. Keep up the great work.
Yes, thank you so much, Rick.
Good stuff. Jamie Martin, president of APSCUF. Make sure you check out their website, apscuf.org. Love to hear your thoughts. A good idea? Consolidate down from 6 to 2 without any idea of what you're creating or what's left. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break right back after this. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1993. That was the day that President Bill Clinton announced his Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. He had campaigned for president, promising to allow all citizens to serve in the military, regardless of sexual orientation. Once he was elected, there was a great deal of opposition to his proposal. Military officials railed against the idea of lifting the ban on homosexuals in the military. Members of Congress and the public voiced opposition. President Clinton proposed a compromise he called Don't Ask, Don't Tell. This meant that military officials were not supposed to inquire about the sexual orientation of servicemen and women. Service members were not to be public about their sexual preference. This meant that if members of the LGBT community wanted to pursue a career in the military, they had to hide a significant part of who they were or risk losing their jobs. The policy stood in effect for nearly 2 decades. More than 12,000 officers lost their jobs because they refused to stay in the closet. It is also unknown how many more LGBT people decided not to apply for military service because of the discriminatory division. President Obama pledged to repeal the policy during his first election. It took 2 years after his election until Don't Ask, Don't Tell was finally ended by Congress. Some members of Congress issued dire warnings about repealing the discriminatory policy. But on the 5th anniversary of the repeal, President Obama issued this statement: "Today, Americans can serve the country they love, no matter who they love. And openly gay, lesbian, and bisexual men and women in uniform make our military stronger and America safer." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So today I went to the mailbox and there was a check from the IRS. Honestly, I was expecting it to be just like the stimulus checks, just to come into the bank account, but there was a $500 check from the IRS in the box, and I couldn't help but think of the families that truly desperately need it. Look, I've said before, I don't need it, and there are families that don't, but I'm thinking about those. I'm thinking about my mother. When I was a kid growing up in a housing project, I can't imagine what $500 or $250 coming in the mail to help her put food on the table, to keep a roof over our head, what that would have meant to her. And I say this all the time. One of the driving forces for me as a parent is to never have to look in my child's eyes and know they're hungry and I can do nothing about it. So when I saw these checks going out, that's where my mind went. And I think this is a good thing, and I think it's something we should do more of. And here to share some thoughts on the program, on what really is it going to mean, and maybe should we be making it permanent? I've asked Arohi Pathak to come talk with us. Arohi is the Director for Policy at the Center for American Progress's Poverty to Prosperity program. Arohi, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for inviting me, Rick. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, I'm looking at this check, and I can't help but get a little sentimental and go back to my childhood because we grew up really poor. We grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland, and things were tough for my mother. Single mothers in the 70s wasn't an easy time. But I'm thinking about those parents who today were like my mother and what today would have meant to them.
Yeah, I think you've just actually made my point, Rick. The child tax credit is really, it's a critical lifeline for millions of parents, and particularly for low-income parents and those that are from marginalized communities, so communities of color, parents that might be disabled, parents that are taking care of kids or other loved ones that have long-term disabilities, etc. This is truly a lifeline for them. It essentially is a credit that allows them to supplement their income and really meet the high costs of raising kids. As you well know, since you're a parent, raising kids is actually a very expensive proposition in this country. Childcare by itself is ridiculously expensive and out of reach of most parents. And so if you're a low-income parent, this tax credit is actually something that could save your life, like you said about your mom. So we're very excited about this child tax credit. It's something that has been around since 1997. And truth be told, in the original version of it, it was not a tax credit that really benefited the most low income. It only benefited people who made enough money to actually pay taxes and have a tax liability. So if you were making any less than that, if you were working low wage or sub-minimum wage jobs, and you didn't owe any taxes, you were likely not to receive this tax credit. And most of those families were families of color. And so what the Biden administration has done in the American Rescue Plan is it's expanded the tax credit and it's made it refundable. So it's increased the tax credit, which is huge for low-income families, but it's also made it refundable, which means that even if you don't owe any taxes, you still can access this credit if you are low income, and then it becomes that lifeline. If through the pandemic, if you've lost your job, if you've been furloughed, if you have astronomical bills that you're just not able to pay, having this monthly infusion of money going into your account or getting a check every month is really the difference between helping someone just meet their basic needs versus completely deserting them on a desert island.
Right. So the question then becomes, and I've had this thrown at me a couple of times. So then, if you did use this as a credit, you're inevitably going to have to pay it back at the end of the year, right?
I'm sorry, say that again.
If you are someone who does file your taxes and you do pay into the tax fund, this was just the money that you would have received as a credit on your taxes. So exactly. This is a zero-sum game for somebody who was going to save it to the end of the year.
Exactly. Yeah. But for someone who is not, or for someone particularly right now, as so many people are struggling to overcome the recession and the pandemic, this is actually, it offers a bit of financial stability that they might not have had over the past year and a half. And it particularly as schools are opening, as childcare centers are opening, people need to be able to buy their kids school supplies, or since we're in the summer right now, pay for camp, pay for diapers, things like that. This money really helps towards all of that.
Yeah. Now, what I hear from people screaming about is it's socialism. It's socialism, and we can't have socialism, Arohi. It can't happen.
So here is my response to that, Rick. I think, yes, it is expensive, but the cost of poverty to our economy and society is far greater. And if we can give, the wealthy taxpayers, and we can give corporations massive tax breaks, why aren't we investing that in our lowest income families? Why aren't we ensuring that everyone who wants a job has a decent job, that anyone who is struggling to put food on the table has access to food? For anyone who has kids, they're going to high quality schools. Those are all things that should just be our basic expectation from one of the wealthiest countries in the world.
No, I'm with you there, but I'm in the pool the other day. My son's a lifeguard, so I go over and very proud of my son having his first job, 15. He's a lifeguard, and I'm listening to the other parents, going on and on about how horrible this is and how bad it is and how it's rewarding irresponsibility, and it's like I said, socialism. It's bad spending. And, they're just rambling on in this in a very angry way. So what response do we give those folks who claim that, this is just rewarding people for being irresponsible?
So I think my first gut reaction would be to ask them, well, if they lost their job, how would they feel about this? If they were not able to pay their bills because of the pandemic, if they weren't able to put food on the table because of the pandemic, would they refuse to take money like this from the government? And they actually do have the option of giving this money right back to the government. They don't have to keep it if they're so against it.
They're not doing that.
So that is one reaction that I have. But more importantly, I think our country has so poverty in our country is, it's an endemic problem. There's millions and millions of people in poverty. There's 11 million kids living below the federal poverty line right now. I'm sure the pandemic has really exacerbated those difficulties for far too many people. But in our country, poverty is a policy choice. It's not a personal choice. No one goes out and says, hey, today I'm going to quit my job so I can get food stamps, and when I run out of those, I will be just fine. No one makes those decisions for themselves or their families. But we have created political systems, and we have passed policies that keep people in poverty in our country, frankly. And we have a moral imperative to actually make sure that no one is being left behind, that everyone has access to opportunity in this country, that everyone has the basic ability to make sure that their kids don't go hungry, that they have a roof over their heads, that they have the ability to educate their kids, and the ability to have a good paying job if they want one.
Yep. No, for me, that's the key, because, and I've said on this program a number of times, I'm generally against the idea of handout programs. I'm generally against, just here, take this. I believe in work. I believe people have to go to work. I believe there are therapeutic qualities to work. There's self-confidence that comes with work. And if the private sector can't or won't create enough jobs for everyone to have a living wage job, the public sector has to. So I would love to see, Joe Biden's talked about a green conservation corps kind of a CCC kind of thing for that. I'm all in favor of that. But for me in this moment, this is the right program at the right time to help people make it through this rough period, and most importantly, help children. So given that, why do I want to make this permanent well on into the future? What's the argument for the permanency of this program?
Sure, that's a really good question. And I think the bottom line is, to ensure that people can take care of their kids in this country. I think there are too many people who are falling through the cracks. And Rick, I think you started this show by talking about how you don't necessarily need the tax credit. In fact, I would say the same thing about myself. I'm a single mom, but I don't really need the tax credit. But there are millions of people in this country that do. And so making this into a permanent benefit would ensure that everyone has an opportunity or a chance to succeed. But more importantly, going back to that policy, poverty being a policy choice, going back to that point, I want to point out that because our policy solutions in this, or because our safety nets in this country are so weak, we sometimes do not have options as parents to do anything but actually, beg for a handout from the government. So take childcare, for example. A childcare center can cost anywhere between $800 to over $1,200 a month. If you are in a low-paid job, or if you are stringing together 3 or 4 or 5 jobs just to make ends meet, how are you going to be able to afford that? And so, you know what? We don't need these handouts if the government was actually going to provide us with a safety net that would ensure that all parents had access to high quality childcare. We don't need these handouts if corporations created jobs that actually paid their employees well and gave them paid time off so that if their kids were sick, they could actually take the time off to be with them, make sure that they get better before returning to work. So we have a lot of policy decisions that we can make that would actually bolster our economy, bolster the workforce, ensure that women and marginalized communities could go back and work in good paying jobs and still take care of their families. But until we're able to do that, we're going to require policy solutions like the child tax credit that will help the most low income, the most marginalized, and those that are falling through the cracks.
I keep coming back to this, and when you talk about policy choices, we're as a country, we're always sliced and diced and pitted against each other, based on all kinds of fault lines, be it race or gender or your class, white collar, blue collar, green collar, ring around the collar. However, they can pit us against each other. They've figured out how to do so. We can't do the things that you've laid out, because I don't know anyone who has said, no, we don't need to figure out something on childcare. We don't need to figure out something to make sure families get health care, that our education systems are better. In fact, in the last segment, we're just talking about how the state of Pennsylvania is destroying its higher education system, because ideologically, we should be privatizing everything. We just don't seem to, as a working class in this country, demand the right things. And I think, some of what you're talking about is the right stuff.
Yeah, and I think this is where the conservative narrative has been very successful. It's been successful in convincing people that they don't need those things. But why don't low-income people in Iowa or low-income people in Washington, D.C. need quality education? What is wrong with that? That's something that everyone should be demanding. Everyone should be demanding jobs that pay well and treat employees with dignity and respect. It's mind-boggling that we have somehow convinced a large swath of the country to believe that that's not in their best interest. But that's a conservative frame. That's something that we have to fight, because the truth of the matter is, if we continue to go that way, we're just going to see poverty increase in this country. We're just going to see the wealthy get wealthier and the poor get poorer and the middle class get squeezed every single day.
Yeah, but Arohi, Arohi, the reality is you can't throw money at these problems.
That's right. Yes.
No, you have to throw money at these problems. That's how you help poor people.
These problems. Without investing in these problems, you're not going to be able to create any solutions. And so, at the end of the day, I suppose it just comes down to what do you believe in? Do you believe in a society that takes care of all its residents and ensures that everyone has an opportunity? Or would you prefer that, people like Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson continue to fly to space and spend billions of dollars just fly to space for no apparent no apparent reason or no public service or no public good. It's bizarre that people have that much money and that they can take their money and do that with it when there's so many people in this country that could benefit from that. So, what is our moral compass here? What is it that we want at the end of the day? More space travel or better schools for kids?
No, you're spot on. I started off the show talking about the fact that the top 10% of households in this country control 80% of the wealth. Because I've had people go, oh, you can't tax the rich. I go, you have to tax the rich because they've literally got all the money. That's where it's at.
And why can't we tax the rich? What's the argument there?
Well, because we're all embarrassed millionaires. Eventually, we're gonna all win the lottery. Maybe we're gonna all go in our garage and we're gonna tinker and we're gonna come up with the next Google. Tell me I'm wrong. Is that not the thinking?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But not everyone has the means to be able to gamble in order to make money. In fact, that's a very poor investment strategy. Putting it into your retirement savings might be a better option instead.
But sadly, the reality is what's happened in this country is we've turned retirement security into a gamble. Now everyone's, playing the lottery retirement game because defined benefit pensions are a thing of the past. And the security that my grandparents' generation built for themselves and for future generations has been ripped away from us. So last question I've got for you, because we want to make this permanent. We want to help low-income folks. We want to help people like me when I was a kid. How do we do that?
By making this permanent, by making the child care tax credit it's one of the things that we can do. It is a proven anti-poverty program, much like the earned income tax credit. Expanding the earned income tax credit, particularly for elderly adults without children, is yet another way in which we can reduce poverty. I mentioned earlier, paying jobs that actually pay living wages, come with benefits, come with paid time off, and retirement and healthcare and all those other things that people need to live. We know how to deal with poverty. In this country, we actually have a lot of solutions for dealing with alleviating poverty.
We just have to have the political will to do it, and we yell at our representatives. We elect people who are going to do some of the stuff. I'm right there with you. But Arohi, I appreciate the time and the work that you guys are doing. Folks will check out the website, AmericanProgress.org, and the most recent piece. Now is the time to permanently expand the child tax credit. Good stuff. Arohi, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me over, Rick. Bye.
All right, let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1848. That was the day the Convention on Women's Rights began in Seneca Falls, New York. The organizers of this convention brought together some of the leading women's activists of the day, such as Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Lucretia Mott. The meeting included numerous discussions on the role of women in society. Leaders presented a declaration of sentiments. It included a list of oppressions faced by women of the day. Several had to do with work and economic issues. For example, it noted that men monopolized nearly all the profitable employments, while women could earn only a scanty remuneration. It also declared he closes against her all the avenues of wealth and distinction, which he considers most honorable to himself. As a teacher of theology, medicine, or law, she is not known. Despite these limitations, many women, poor women in particular, were forced by economic necessity to work. By 1840, 8,000 women and girls as young as 13 worked in the New England textile mills. Women almost always earned far less than men. Female textile mill workers in Massachusetts had formed the first union of working women in the United States, the Lowell Female Labor Reform Association. Of course, the Seneca Falls Women's Rights Convention provoked scorn and outrage from many, especially men. A local newspaper wrote, "This bolt is the most shocking and unnatural incident incident ever recorded in the history of humanity. If our ladies will insist on voting and legislating, where, gentlemen, will be our dinners and our elbows? Where are our domestic firesides and the holes in our stockings? Even today, women still earn less than men. For every dollar men earn, women only earn 78 cents. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
It's time for America to go back to the future. The future of true greatness created by people united to build a strong nation for the common good. From the start of our United States, Americans have backed leaders who dared to do big public projects. Jefferson, Lincoln, T.R., F.D.R., Truman, Ike, JFK, and LBJ all dared to achieve bold goals. It's only since Ronald Reagan's government is evil demagoguery that our presidents and lawmakers shrivel to no-can-do mediocrities, unwilling even to try tackling America's big needs or invest in our people's unlimited possibilities. Their failure is why our nation's infrastructure, once world-class, has deteriorated to an embarrassing 16th in the world. It's hard to muster any national pride in chanting, "We're number 16." But surprise, here comes Joe, a lifelong go-slow Democrat, unexpectedly proposing a get-serious, roll-up-our-sleeves $2 trillion package of investments to modernize and extend America's collapsing infrastructure. In addition to roads, bridges, and dams, it gives a long-overdue boost to such needs as rural high-speed broadband and providing affordable child care facilities, all geared to creating good union jobs and lifting local economies. Even more transformative is Biden's Back to the Future method of paying for this Rebuild America agenda by returning to progressive taxation. Instead of the same old no-tax, laissez-faire extremism that Washington has practiced for 40 years, Biden will at long last demand that multinational corporate behemoths stop dodging their tax obligations to America. It's the same fair tax policy that funded our nation's real needs in the past, while also increasing productivity and raising living standards for millions of working families. This is Jim Hightower saying, let's do it again. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Evidently, Goldman Sachs workers in London, their head office going back to wearing masks. Even though the government's saying, no, everything's fine, don't worry about it. And sadly, the stories that I'm hearing, I got to tell you, it ain't over yet. Definitely not over. Now that you've got the Surgeon General coming out and saying that he's in favor of local mask mandates coming back, as Los Angeles was the first major U.S. County to reinstate the mask requirement. And I know they're saying, no, this is just because of Gavin Newsom. It's not because of the virus. No. It's everything else. Everything else. Anyway, here to share some thoughts and clear up some of the misinformation, some of the lies, the half-truths, and all that. I've asked our good friend Dr. Kelly Senholz to come back and share some thoughts. Kelly, thanks for taking time for us.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I'm in this position where I looked at the news over the weekend that 97% of the people who are in hospitals with the virus are unvaccinated. So I'm going, yep, good for them. Maybe we can get rid of some of them. And that, the people who are dying from it overwhelmingly are people who were not vaccinated. So self-thinning of the herd. I don't see a downside.
You know what? I've been hearing that a lot, and it is true. It's a reflection of how sad our society has become that we have to just
think
throw the
poorly.
ballots overboard.
Yep. Think poorly of me if you have to. But the reason we're in this position are these people are the ones who have been holding us back. The slack-jawed, Fox News watching, knuckle-dragging mouth breathers, they're the ones who have held us back all this time.
Oh, I'm with you all the way. But here's the problem. We have 4% of the population that is immune compromised. Either they're they have cancer and they're under treatment, or they have medication or disease that causes their immune system to not work well. And we know for a fact that those people are not having the same good reaction to the vaccine as others. They get a little bit of benefit, but not anywhere near what a normal vaccinated person does. But also, the problem is we already have new variants coming out after the Delta. Like, there's more to come. This is what's so frustrating. Like, we talked about, what was this? Months ago, we talked about this, how, there was, in fact, we talked about this in March of 2020, that one of the biggest problems of Trump's response to the virus is that with all that virus floating around, we would get dangerous variants. We talked about it, and here we are. And now I want to talk about the fact that this is not going to be the only variant. We already have more variants coming that are going to be more resistant to the vaccine, that are going to cause maybe worse illness, maybe more infectious even than the new Delta variant. We've got to get a grip on this. And it's so intricately tied to the failure of our justice system right now. Everything is tied together. And it's basically, we're under attack. They're using the vaccine issue and the mask issue to attack us from within. And it's succeeding. It's just pitiful to watch.
And this is one of those things where I'm in this fear position of we're not shutting down again. I don't see there being any more shutting down. I just don't. That this is one of those things you're gonna have to figure out how to power through. And given that I believe that, how bad could this get come fall and into the winter?
So I think that everybody, I would say the most people I talk to say what you just said, that, like, we've been through so much, we can't do that again. But people are underestimating how bad this can get. And, let's look to history as our guide. The second season of the pandemic in 1918 was the worst. And it's possible this may be the case with us. Now, we do have people that are vaccinated, but I'm telling you, I'm hearing from doctors on the ground that people with vaccinations are getting really sick. It doesn't mean you can be 100% sure that you're going to be fine. Really sick isn't that great either.
Right.
It's not dead, but it's not that great. And long-term illness and neurological dysfunction and brain damage. I mean, all those things still exist.
Yeah, I don't want to be really sick. I don't even want to be a little bit sick, to be honest.
I don't want to be a little bit sick. I don't want to be sick at all. And one of the problems is the infectious nature. Now, we know that the regular virus, remember, way back in the beginning, the first word we got is, oh, my God, it is a 3.5 R0. And that means, like, for every person that gets it, they're on average infecting 3.5 people. Then they kind of toned it down, like maybe 2.5, maybe 3, but it was still bad. Now this one is almost just under 6. And what that means is if you're walking, we have this on film in Australia, a guy that was infected walked through a restaurant, and a lady came then and sat down in a chair and had lunch, and she ended up getting it. She didn't even come in contact with him. She just walked through the air that he had walked through.
Well, how do they know that?
Well, the reason they know it is, number one, we have ways to tag the virus. In other words, and this is important for your viewers to know, if there's an anti-vaxxer who's careless and loud and stupid and infects people, we can actually take the virus from that person and from the infected person and find out that, yes, he was the one that infected her. It's a long story of how we do that, but we can do that. And secondly, in that particular case, there were cameras he went to eat at a mall, And so there were cameras everywhere, and they followed his path through the mall, and then they could compare it to the people that got infected.
Wow.
Yeah. So they know exactly how close he was. And
Yeah, well,
how long
I
he
find
was in
that fascinating. I also find it incredibly scary that they're able to follow you to that kind of a degree.
Yes, yeah, it is. But what that means too, and this happened with AIDS, it's happened with other diseases. If somebody is callously disregarding your life, let's say we have one of these incidents where it's a Trumper yelling at someone and spitting on them or whatever, and they give them COVID, we can actually prove that that's what happened. So I think we're going to see some lawsuits out of this. If they're not afraid for their own life, at least they should be afraid that they're going to be sued for everything they own.
Well, maybe that's how you because I keep getting people saying, "Oh, I shouldn't have to be vaccinated. I shouldn't have to be able to do that because so I can have a job." You keep hearing all of these different arguments, and I'm like, how hard is it to protect yourself? Now, interestingly enough, my wife came home today because she's finally gone back to getting the occasional massage. The woman that this massage therapist that she goes through, told her that some of her customers are completely crazy. The one evidently told her that she can't come back to her because she's vaccinated and that's the mark of the beast and she's Satan. Another one told her that she's vaccinated and so she's going to slough off on me and make me sterile.
Yeah, that's a big one actually. There's this, I believe, is coming out of the wellness/spirituality communities. They were hit hard with Russian propaganda and the anti-vax stuff, and they really dug into it and magnified it and made it into something totally crazy. I would say that those people are literally delusional. I talked with one lady online, and what she was saying was literally delusional. I recommended that she get professional help and remove herself immediately from any sources of that information because she was literally out there.
Now, I'm sure YouTube is now going to throw me off of YouTube for this episode for having even brought that up because, they are doing some censoring. And I got to tell you, I'm not thrilled.
Are they really?
Oh, yeah. I've had an episode thrown off for having talked about something, and I was mocking it. We had an episode pulled of something that I was mocking, and there's the appeal process was not even worth going through. But I do understand people complaining about being censored when talking about this stuff. But at some point,
I do. But
this is where I'm going.
Scary.
This is where I'm going. But at some point, the people who are out there deliberately spreading misinformation and lying, at some point you got to do something about that.
This, not just, is YouTube owned by Facebook? Anyway, Facebook also does this where they'll take, somebody will be blaring off some kind of crazy shit, and somebody else says, no, that's crazy. And then that person gets taken off and the crazy stuff remains. I've seen that enough to know that this cannot possibly be by accident. You could see how a mistake like that could happen maybe once in a while. I mean, they're dealing with millions of people, but it does appear to be a pattern.
Yeah, no, I mean they've got their algorithm, and it's targeted at anyone talking about it at all, and I think mocking it is part of it. But that's where we were. So I want to go back to this sterile thing because I have heard this a couple of times. How is it possible that you being vaccinated would make me sterile?
Well, I mean, this is pure magical thinking. There, 1 in 5 Americans right now believe that the vaccine is inserting chips into us. 1 in 5.
Wow.
Believe that. I mean, this is, in part, I believe the reason that we cannot shut it down is because our legal system is broken. If Trump went to jail and was paraded up and down the street for the fool that he is in handcuffs, and all of his minions and the legislators that helped him were arrested for what they've done, then yes, we may have a little flare-up of violence or whatever, but in the end, they would have to acknowledge that something wasn't right. In other words, the very fact that they're still walking around gives credence to the vaccine chip theory. Because if they're not in jail, that means it must be valid. And here's the other thing. I think that, we still have, there is an extraordinary number of pedophiles surrounding the president. It appears, just statistically and for no other reason, that the Republican Party was using that as a pressure tactic to keep people in line and to get things done they wanted to get done. And they're not acting on that. Why is Matt Gaetz not in jail? He's walking around spreading these rumors, saying it very defiantly, very brusquely, very stupidly, and all those people believe him. And they believe him because he's not in jail. So the normal people say, Matt Gaetz is a pedophile. He's going to be arrested for child sex trafficking. And nothing happens.
Yeah, but
and all that does is reinforce their belief that these anti-vax things he's saying are true, and that we're in imminent danger. The government's being taken over by evil, robots or whatever the new thing is. He can say any of that, and they will believe him because he's walking around free.
So just so I'm clear on what you just said, because I don't want to mistake. You're saying that they believe the president was surrounded by pedophiles, not that you believe he's surrounded by pedophiles.
Oh, he was. I mean, multiple of them were arrested and are in jail right now. Remember, I forget his name. He came from, he was from overseas, but he came into the United States with a sex-trafficked boy, and he was arrested and put in jail. There's several of them. Like how many pedophiles do you know that you hang around with? None.
I don't know any.
And right, and he is surrounded by them. He's got Jim Jordan. Hastert was a pedophile the entire time he was Speaker of the House. This is undeniable.
Oh, you're talking about the former guy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but McConnell and all the people there were holding him in power, and they knew he was a pedophile. It was an open secret in Washington, D.C., I would say, but everybody was afraid to bring him down, and finally somebody did. But we've got Jim Jordan. Whatever happened with him? He never got anything happen. And even let's broaden it a little more. What about Ken Paxton, who's the acting AG of Texas, who is under significant, I have no idea why he's not in jail. Why is he not in jail? He has done serious and undeniable financial crimes that anybody would be in jail for, but he's not. And he's leading the charge on all of this. The people that are leading the charge on this are definitely, there's a large proportion of them that should be in jail or have legal consequences. If you read up on Paxton's case, the only logical thing you can say after reading it is, why is he not in jail? He's under indictment.
No.
And he's been under indictment since he was elected 4 years ago. Why is he not in jail? Why is the case not moving forward? Why has nothing happened? Are they just running out the clock on it?
So why isn't it? Why hasn't the Justice Department done anything? Why hasn't Merrick Garland done anything?
And I really truly believe, as we're being killed one by one with this virus, that a key factor in this is that justice has not been done. And therefore, the people that are, and they are somewhat victims, maybe they're afraid for whatever reason. Maybe they're just stupid people. Maybe they had a baseline of being racist to begin with. But they're subject to this propaganda. The people pouring it out are the same people I'm talking about. Matt Gaetz should be in jail. Ken Paxton should be in jail. Our post office director should be in jail. We have enough on him for crimes that anybody else would go to prison for a long time for. And yet he still sits in his position. And what does Merrick Garland do? He turns around and he's helping Trump with his rape case. What the fuck? What is that?
Yeah, what was that?
What is that?
Yeah.
And tonight there was another one. Like, instead of prosecuting somebody who obviously should be prosecuted, he again is turning around and doing something that appears to help the people that are spreading the COVID lies. Those two things are so intricately tied. I have no idea why the people of our country are not in the streets protesting to get Merrick Garland out because he's done nothing about the insurrection. Arresting some low-level people and patting them on the hand for their crimes is not doing something.
Yeah, well, again, this is where we needed a commission the day after. We needed subpoena power from the day after. And you're right, we needed people arrested and perp walked right from the beginning. I'm right there with you. Last question I did want to ask, because, again, I want to get back to the virus. There's talk that, come this fall, we're going to see an explosion. What are you anticipating in the coming months?
Think about this. If we have a bowl of people that are all unvaccinated in various parts of the country, and even in parts that have high vaccination rates, and they're spreading it to each other, people that are vaccinated have the virus, but they're walking around spreading it too. We know in southern Missouri that the hospitals are overwhelmed. They're begging for help. It's a bad situation, but they also can ask for help from other areas right now. In a month from now, let's go back to the basic math. It's logarithmic math. 2 plus 2 does not equal 4. 2 plus 2 equals 26. And 26 plus 26 equals 1,040. And it's going to go up fast. Some of the graphs in some states have a vertical line now of infection rate going up. That's not going to end well. We're going to have overwhelmed hospitals. They're going to beg the politicians to shut everything down. And at some point, it's going to happen. But I got to tell you, the doctors are burned out. And this newest phase of the virus has got many of them on their knees. Like, they're just like, I can't believe we're going to do this again.
Yeah.
They're desperately sad. They're desperately upset. And if they walk out, there will be people in the streets laying there dying.
Is there a vaccine? Is there a vaccine coming to boost? Is there anything like that that we can look to, or this just all bad?
Hope is not a strategy, but the reason the mRNA vaccine is such a miracle is because it's actually pretty easy to make a new vaccine. So I have to hope that they are making one as we speak, and that within a month or two, we're going to have a new vaccine out that will be able to be given to at least a certain population.
All right.
Certainly, they're mumbling about another vaccination. So, yeah, we're going to be hitting this hard until we can get everybody vaccinated at once and get rid of this.
There you go. Dr. Senholz, I appreciate the time. As always, good talking with you.
Oh, you have a wonderful night.
You as well. Our good friend, Dr. Kelly Senholz. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day San Francisco's Central Labor Council voted narrowly to end the general strike, then in its fourth day. It had been one of 3 historic strikes that turned the tide towards industrial organizing in the 1930s. It emerged as part of the ongoing longshoremen strike, which started in May. The decision was controversial. Longshoremen and seamen raged that leadership of the strike had been torn from them by more conservative elements. As author of Workers on the Waterfront, Bruce Nelson puts it, after 2.5 months on strike, literally thousands of arrests, at least 6 deaths, and hundreds of serious injuries, the men and their families were holding the line. But their allies were gradually cutting the ties of solidarity that had been the strike's lifeblood. The shipping bosses forced a vote for arbitration from the longshoremen and without the seamen. As Nelson notes, this served to drive a wedge between the 2 unions, creating a rift that would only deepen. The 2 would continue to strike until the end of July, but the strike left the longshoremen emboldened. They pushed back on the job, driving off scabs and establishing work rules and conditions ahead of the arbitrator's ruling, which came in October. The hiring hall was finally established. While it was decided that the union and the shipping bosses would rule the hall jointly, the union controlled the position of dispatcher. This meant that the union determined hiring, which put an end to the despised shape-up. The award also mandated wage raises and a coast-wide contract. It would serve as a catalyst for the founding of the ILWU 3 years later. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Well, that was interesting, to say the least. And look, here's the thing. The stuff on the virus, accurate. I'm worried, like anyone, that in the fall we're going to get slammed again, because I don't know if you've noticed, most people, and I'll be honest, I've been a little lax myself, but most people, they think it's over. Most people I know, it's over. In fact, I had this discussion, and the reason that I don't believe we're going back to shutting down, the reason I don't think we're going to go back to extreme measures anytime soon, unless things get really, really bad to where we're losing 3,000 people again a day. And even then, I don't think we're going to be shutting down again. I don't think the crazy will allow that to happen. But I got into a discussion with a guy who came right out and told me that it's not the government's job to protect we the people. It's not their job. It's not their job to vaccinate people. It's not their job to mandate masks. It's not their job. It's the job of the individual. And I simply said, have you ever read the preamble of the Constitution? Has that ever crossed your eyeballs? When I was a kid, we sang it because of Schoolhouse Rock. I was a kid of the 70s. Schoolhouse Rock was everything. And I still remember, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union. All that stuff. I remember that. In order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And I always wondered what the hell posterity meant. But I remember that as a kid. The little schoolhouse jingle, promote the general welfare. That is literally the job of our government, as stated in the preamble of the Constitution. But again, these are the people who tell you, have you read the Constitution? Yeah, the first freaking lines of it, which tells me you haven't. You may have it there in your pocket. You may like to wave it around a lot, but clearly didn't read it. Again, like a lot of my church friends who've never actually read the Bible, they go and have someone tell them about it. This is the same kind of thing. It is literally the job of the government to do exactly that. promote the general welfare, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense of we the people, of the nation. Jeez. Crazy times. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Can never get enough Ney. Right back.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
We are getting this done. Thank you.
Thank you. Senate Democrats unveil massive $3.5 trillion infrastructure and climate deal.
This is our generational task, and it must unite us.
European Union unveils landmark Green Deal. Plus, yet more evidence that meaningful action on climate would save lives and save money.
All of those savings and more straight ahead from BrandBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Things are even hot in Alaska. Yesterday, temperatures climbed to as high as 92 degrees, which means this year the salmon the grizzlies are catching is fully cooked.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, it kind of seems like they forgot about us for a while, but now, finally, the Democrats have come out with their infrastructure deal. Sort of.
Yes. Senate Democrats unveiled a sweeping budget deal to fund some of President Joe Biden's top priorities. It targets $3.5 trillion in spending over the next 10 years that they intend to pass under Senate budget reconciliation rules that allow for a simple majority vote. The amount comes out to about $350 billion a year. That's less than half the U.S. military's annual budget. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer lauded the proposal that increases spending to assist working families and also includes significant investment in climate action, paid for with taxes on corporations and wealthy Americans.
This is generational, transformational change to help American families.
This is on top of the bipartisan infrastructure compromise previously negotiated with a handful of moderate Senate Republicans. And of course, that's if those Republicans don't renege on that deal.
Oh, they're going to renege.
The new Senate Democrats' proposal boosts critical clean energy policies with a national clean electricity standard targeting 80% clean electricity and cutting carbon emissions economy-wide in half by 2030. A civilian climate corps to create jobs in addressing climate change and conservation. Incentives to boost clean cars and the weatherization and electrification of buildings. Wildfire prevention, plus reorienting energy tax breaks to promote renewable energy. Also, the budget plan would include the first ever carbon border tax. That's a tariff on imports from countries that don't enact emissions reduction policies to protect domestic manufacturers while simultaneously pressuring other countries to reduce their emissions that cause dangerous global warming.
A lot of good stuff for climate in that package, if it comes together.
Indeed, and the devil will be in the details, as congressional committees will now draw up detailed language for the legislation. However, Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of the coal state of West Virginia said on Wednesday that he will not support any provisions that he believes would eliminate fossil fuels.
Oh, brother.
On the same day, the European Union outlined its own proposal for a landmark European Green Deal that looks suspiciously similar to Progressive Democrats' Green New Deal. The EU Green Deal includes a stronger carbon tax and boosts renewable energy and social spending to ensure a just transition for workers and households. The European Union's plan is an ambitious and legally binding roadmap for climate action. It targets cutting the coalition's carbon emissions by 55% by 2030, putting the EU on the road to net zero emissions by 2050. It also includes a carbon border tax similar to Senate Democrats' proposal. In a press conference, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen focused on the moral imperative to break away from fossil fuels.
Our current fossil fuel economy has reached its limits. And we know that we have to move on to a new model, one that is powered by innovation, that has clean energy.
Oh, I hope they don't tell Joe Manchin.
There are too many provisions to list here, but the EU will ban sales of new gas and diesel-powered cars by 2035 and enact new carbon taxes on fossil fuel use in aviation and shipping and other sectors. But to be clear, if enacted, the policies outlined in both the EU and the U.S. are not sufficient to stay below the 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature target in the UN Paris Climate Agreement that scientists say offers the best chance to avoid catastrophic climate impact.
So all of this action, and none of it is up to the task of what scientists say we need to do.
Not yet, but again, a target that is not set is a target that is not met.
Wow.
Finally, good news. A new global economic study shows that climate investments outlined in both the EU and U.S. plans will pay us back. A new meta-analysis of clean energy studies finds a rapid transition is not only achievable and affordable, but will result in immense economic and public health benefits, including creating 1 million net new jobs in the U.S. while avoiding $1 to $3 trillion in public health and economic losses through 2050.
I'll take it. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it looks like Jim Jordan's going to be on the Republican side of the select committee. Going to be interesting to see how Gim goes and is the attack dog for Trump after McCarthy had the little powwow with Trump. Going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day and maybe a little preview of the sparring yet to come of our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney, to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So, any surprise Jim Jordan's going to be one of the 5 House Republicans on the Select Committee?
No, I knew he was the first choice. No question about it. Now they've got Representative Banks. He's kind of like you'd call, I guess, the rising star and leader of the study committee. That's the conservative, group. It's been called Freedom Caucus, et cetera, everything in the back. Rodney Davis was a natural because he's the ranking member of the House Administration Committee. Zoe Lofgren is the Democrat chair. She's on the committee, of course. And then they had one of the choices, Representative Troy Nehls, and he's a freshman and a former county sheriff. And of course he voted for the objections. That's the lineup. But as far as Jordan, that was if he only had to pick one person, McCarthy would put Jordan on there.
Sure.
If he had to pick one. Which, by the way, everybody who was speculating McCarthy wasn't going to put anybody on, and he was, by the way, getting pressured to just ignore this thing. Quote, it would have been a huge political mistake. If you want to get your voice in there, you got to be at the table.
No, and this is what I tell Democrats all the time about talk radio. You're getting beaten. Right. You're getting beaten badly. You need to get into the ring and throw a couple of punches.
Right.
And I knew there was no way they were going to let the Democrats and let Liz Cheney do the whole song and dance without putting Jim Jordan out there to do his shtick.
And, on the radio, Ellen Ratner, our friend, your friend, my friend, wrote 123 Talk. And was, preaching years ago that the Democratic side's got to engage. And they kind of said, no, we're, they kind of put it aside. So I think, shows are important, shows like yours. And again, participating is well worth it. And, of course, they're going to have people. And Jim Jordan is going to be the number one, attack dog on this whole issue. Number one.
Yeah, I mean, because you got to make it about something else. And their job, it's my opinion, that their job is to deflect from themselves and from Trump to other places, and that's what'll be interesting to me is to see where they try and direct our attention and the narrative.
Well, it's interesting you say this because I was just asked today by a couple of people that were up on the Hill what I thought, because I chaired House administration, oversaw the Capitol Police, the whole deal. And I was saying today, if I were Jordan, I would bring up something that really hasn't been zeroed in on, and I would go after the Speaker and the Chair of House Administration, because they would have went after, me in those days if something happened in the Capitol. Although we got along with Steny Hoyer and we worked together, but in this political environment, I would not be surprised if he doesn't go into, what were you all doing? Why didn't you do your duty? Because you're right. If they just make it, no, Trump didn't do this, or no, you're wrong, it's not enough. They've got to take it a different direction, and what better way to say, well, you shirked your responsibility.
No, they got to blame somebody. It's got to be somebody else.
Right.
Antifa's not flying. They tried the Antifa thing. That didn't fly. I don't see them going that direction. I may be wrong, but I don't see that. But I think you're right. You got to blame because Nancy Pelosi and them controlled the House. They're the ones who are in charge of the Capitol Police. That seems to be the natural attack line.
Right, and that hasn't been brought up a lot. And I think that I would assume he's going to go after that. He's got to. This can't be just entirely about Trump, or he has failed to bring in a new point.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and this is what's interesting to me is, I think when you start putting those Capitol policemen on the stand, you bring them in and you hear their stories. I don't know how you attack that.
Well, you don't. What he'll attack. He'll attack the two sergeant of arms who are gone. They resigned. The Capitol Hill chief of police is gone. And if he's really, really smart, he will praise rank and file, go after the three that aren't there, and tie them directly to the, quote, two Democratic leaders.
Yep. There it is.
That's what I would think he would do.
Yeah, well, write that down, because I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure you're right, and that's the way we're going.
Right.
Going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because for me, I think this should have been done the day after. We should have started this almost immediately. But here we are. What is this? Months later, and you finally got the first felony conviction. The guy from Florida going to serve 8 months.
This is just bizarre. When you read what the judge said, which is just interesting, and he goes on to say. The guy's not a bad person. He goes on to say that. And the judge said, I had to struggle to strike this balance. The horrors of the day, at least the judge admits it was a horrible day, while narrowly punishing Hodgkins for what he actually did that day, quote, this is the judge. And then he goes on to say something that I think is just totally wrong. But he talks about the remorse. Okay, I'll give him that one. Let's say, remorse. Then he goes on to say about the fact that maybe this will make other people, plea. Well, frankly, I think it would be better if they had went about a year and a half or even up the sentence. And then I think that would make more people potentially say, wow, this guy didn't do the worst of the worst. He got a year and a half.
Yeah.
I think it would have worked the reverse. And that's what the prosecutors argued. They wanted to show a message, send it loud and clear, that to other riders, if they're caught, they're going to be held accountable. This is what's going to happen to them. So if the guy that was the least problematic or the least offensive of the whole crew on the floor of the Senate that day, if he got a year and a half or 2 years, well, guess what? I think the others have to say to their lawyer, maybe we better make a plea deal.
We better do something. Yeah, you're right. And look, I've been saying for a while, they're a bunch of white guys. They're going to get lenient treatment. They're people of means for the most part. They're going to get lenient treatment. And this, he got 8 months. It's more than I thought he was expecting. I was expecting him to get. And also, as I understand, in Florida, he won't be able to vote for a while, and no guns.
Well, let me throw this out here. If I would come up to Cardile, okay, and you and I broke into the post office, all right, and didn't take anything, but we broke in, what do you think we'd get? Huh? Seriously, I'm serious. Okay? We're going to get more than 8 months, besides bad publicity. Yeah. We're going to get more than 8 months. Seriously.
I'm not advocating breaking into the post office. No, you're right. And this is
hypothetically. Yeah, we would get if anybody would go break into the post office tonight in their town. I promise you, federally, it will be more of a charge than 8 months.
Yeah, and that's not even urinating on the desk or defecating on the floor.
Right, exactly.
I wonder what that guy's going to get.
Right. So I just think it was a mild sentence. I was surprised by it.
I wasn't actually. I was like slap. I was thinking slaps on the wrist across the board. When the first person got probation, I'm like, yeah, you know what, this is all going to get whitewashed. But I was going, well, maybe they're selling out the bigger fish. But what we end up learning is there's never a bigger fish, and they all just get slaps on the wrist.
Well, plus they don't have to sell out the bigger fish because there were so many cameras on everybody. They've got the bigger fish without getting the little fish.
Yeah, no, they recorded their treason. Good for them.
And see, I think the prosecutors had a motive here of taking somebody who wasn't the most offensive and going for a year and a half. I think it was a smart move by the prosecutors. Take one of the least offensive, go for a year and a half, then you show the other 530-some. Wow, just think what this guy got, and look what you did, and it makes plea deals easier, and it makes the process go quicker, and more people, get sentenced.
There what, another 535 yet to go? So we've got another 535 disappointments yet to come.
I think it's very disappointing.
And the message, sadly, is I guess now, not a big deal. Do it again.
And people say, well, it's the Capitol, so why is it supposed to be more special? Well, because it is. Number one. Number two, it's because the purpose of why they were in there, not just the destruction, and not just the location.
Yep.
But it's also the purpose.
They were there to stop They were there to stop the certification of the presidential vote.
Exactly, and the fact it is the U.S. Capitol, and if you start allowing people to just go in there and carry guns in, do whatever they want to do, then, you're going to stop the process of government every week.
Somebody defecated on the floor, and I don't know how someone goes, just a normal tour. Bob, it was just a normal day. It was a normal day in the Capitol.
There's the other thing. It still amazes me that any member at all could say these were just tourists. Look, it'd be okay to say, they did wrong, they shouldn't have done this, but it wasn't Trump's fault. They could go ahead and make that argument, the people that are saying this. But to add to this that they're just tourists, they were just taking selfies, is beyond my imagination. I don't see how they can say it at all.
Not sure. I forgot where my head was going there for a second. Thanks to the, but I look at this and it's one of those moments where you go, there is one thing that is shocking to me, and Trump was calling for the name of the person who shot that Ashley Babbitt, and I don't know if I brought this up to you before or asked you before, but the one thing that is shocking to me is that no one has leaked that officer's name. Because
yes, you had mentioned that, and I have to believe that there still has to be somewhere some decency, in the process of the Hill, and I would hope members that would, even if they have obviously different opinions of her being shot or not, would realize that the function of the Capitol Hill Police has always been to make sure people return home alive. There's 10,000 people in that complex. That's what they do.
Crazy. Last question I got for you, because OPEC and Russia, they say they're going to increase oil production. Because I just saw, I think a woman she's the lieutenant governor of Idaho. She tweeted out, I think put on Facebook or tweeted out day before. She filled up her pickup truck. It cost her $100. Thanks, Joe Biden. So it's all Joe Biden's fault that that we've cut oil production here in this country and around the globe. It's all Joe Biden's fault.
Well, I mean, look, here, OPEC and the Russian-led producing allies, as I'll call them, are going to, open up huge barrels of the crude. And one of the reasons they're going to do that is because of the lack of use of crude right now.
And what is that going to affect us at all? Is it going to bring the price of gas down, or is it not going to matter?
I mean, they're not doing this because they're nice people.
No, they're doing it because there's money to be made.
Right. And, they had a deal that already led to a drop in prices, and they've recovered strongly, this year. So now they're going to make this move. What it will do for us, I don't know. I'm so suspicious anyway of the manipulation by the oil companies, period. And, the stock market and the whole 9 yards.
Yep.
We aren't as dependent on the foreign oil as, we like to say we are. We've got a problem with refining because we haven't built refineries since '76, which is another whole story. But I think, it can't hurt more oil into the market. But I just don't believe that, that these are the honest players that are all of a sudden trying to do the world a favor.
Yeah, not only haven't we built new ones, we've closed ones that we had.
Right. Yes,
They closed 3 in Philadelphia that I guess they're now using for, to store jet fuel or something. But they're no longer using them as refineries. And look, you can't keep complaining about the price of oil if, one, we don't have the refining capacity, and two, as you pointed out, you got these energy companies who are manipulating the hell out of the markets.
They always do. And we would, this would rise up, the prices would go up, we would have hearings, we would drag the oil companies in, and we would talk about refineries, boutique gas, the different gases around the country, and it's difficult to refine, on and on and on. And then, of course, people would say, we're so dependent on the foreign oil, when in reality, we do have a lot of resources. I'm not saying that producing now will hurt the market, but the fact remains, too, some of our demand cut back. So I think that the price increases were oil company manipulation over here.
I'm with you.
Period.
I am right there with you. Bob, I appreciate the time. As always, good stuff, my friend.
Well, thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney. Let's take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1993. That was the day that President Bill Clinton announced his Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. He had campaigned for president, promising to allow all citizens to serve in the military, regardless of sexual orientation. Once he was elected, there was a great deal of opposition to his proposal. Military officials railed against the idea of lifting the ban on homosexuals in the military. Members of Congress and the public voiced opposition. President Clinton proposed a compromise he called Don't Ask, Don't Tell. This meant that military officials were not supposed to inquire about the sexual orientation of servicemen and women. Service members were not to be public about their sexual preference. This meant that if members of the LGBT community wanted to pursue a career in the military, they had to hide a significant part of who they were or risk losing their jobs. The policy stood in effect for nearly 2 decades. More than 12,000 officers lost their jobs because they refused to stay in the closet. It is also unknown how many more LGBT people decided not to apply for military service because of the discriminatory division. President Obama pledged to repeal the policy during his first election. It took 2 years after his election until Don't Ask, Don't Tell was finally ended by Congress. Some members of Congress issued dire warnings about repealing the discriminatory policy. But on the 5th anniversary of the repeal, President Obama issued this statement: "Today, Americans can serve the country they love, no matter who they love. And openly gay, lesbian, and bisexual men and women in uniform make our military stronger and America safer." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this is back. I've had mixed feelings about women being drafted into the military. And I'm at the point now where, in order to have actual equality, I'm not quite against it. And now you have Jack Reed, who is the Democratic senator from Rhode Island. He is the Armed Services Chairman. He is evidently, according to this draft, he has authored a bill that is going to require women to register for selective services. This has been one of those things, when I turned 18, I had to go to the post office and I registered for the military. If there was ever a draft, and I doubt there ever will be, but there might be, who knows? They need to know where you are, what you're doing, where you're going. And if you don't register, you can be fined, imprisoned, and no federal jobs for you as well. So there's a lot of things to go and sign up, and I remember doing it. What was interesting to me, and one of the things that I've said often is, I had to, as a matter of law, I had to go and sign up for selective services, but they didn't give me a card to vote. And I'm like, if I have to go and sign up for potential military service, wouldn't you throw the vote in there as well, to see if, maybe we go to war or not? No, I'm of the mindset that the day you turn 18, you go do that. You do them both. We get everybody signed up. It just seems rational to me, that we make it that easy. You're already there. You're already at the post office. You fill it out, drop it in the box. But I'm in this spot where, I'm the old me is like, no, I don't know. I don't think you draft women. Then I'm like, no, they're equal. Everyone should be in. And maybe, just maybe, if everyone is in, maybe we don't get into these misadventures all over the world. Maybe if everyone's behind is on the line, maybe we don't go blowing things up all across the globe. Maybe we don't get involved in conflict in other places. And I've said this for a long time. If we didn't solely rely on a volunteer military where every time, something came up, we started calling people up going, well, it's your number, come on. We might think a whole lot more about the people we put into positions of power, deciding who's going to do what to who. But evidently this proposed language change would expand the registration for people. It would be all Americans, and it would strike the explicit language of males over 18. And I'm actually in favor of it. Going to be interesting to see how the Party of Family Values does with this. Going to be interesting to see how Republicans come around, if they'll vote for it. This is one of those things where you want to be equal. This is what equality is. We're all in this. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Am I wrong? Should we not? Should we still have voluntary for women but mandatory for men? You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I think it's going to be an interesting discussion on that front. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Got a lot to get to this week. This is the PRO Act Week of Action. Contact your representatives, your senators early. Contact them often. We need to pass the PRO Act. We're going to be talking about it over the next couple of days. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick